Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm back with another Travel Collective interview where today I'm chatting with Anthony Quill all about family travels. We're heading into fall. I think traveling with kids I see them on the airplanes, it's challenging. But the beauty of, I think, what happened during COVID is people have reevaluated that whole work, life, family balance. So I'm excited to hear Anthony's take on this and how he's been traveling with his kids for pretty much since they were born, it sounds like. So, welcome, Anthony.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so we have a 6 and a 9-year-old now, and we've been traveling with them. The first trip was when the oldest was a month old.
Wow.
Uh, Back to that time, right now we're based in the Twin Cities, in Minnesota, where both my wife and I are originally from. In 2014, when our oldest was born, we moved to the island of Malta, which is a tiny little island off the coast of Italy, uh,
Wow.
actually off of Sicily, kind of between Sicily and Libya. And we did that basically at birth. And that was for work, so nothing related to the blogging world I'm in. I just was very fortunate and found a job. And then we realized that traveling with kids is really hard. And, and so I remember the first trip I went alone. I had to find us an apartment and get us a car and get us, registered with the federal government there. And my wife flew alone with that infant
Oh,
to come.
wow.
Um, and so kind of preparing for this interview was kind of fun to think through that old part of my life, which now just feels so long ago, but it's really not that far away, and it's a challenge. Traveling with kids is hard, it's expensive, but it's also very doable. And we went at least 4 or 5 times a year. We went to a different country.
Wow.
With at that point just one of them, and then the second was born in Malta. And so when she was born, then all four of us were traveling around.
And then when they were that young too, I imagine you were wanting to bring either come back to visit family or family was coming to you. The whole airline, international flights.
It was, yeah. So we came back over Christmas for 2 weeks, and each summer we came back for about a month.
Oh,
And
wow.
sometimes we'd come back, my wife would stay, I'd go back to work, and then she'd, bless her heart, come with both kids a little later. Um, but yeah, we did a lot of long haul flights. Malta's a small destination, so the logistics were always complicated because you couldn't really book like a Delta code share flight all the way through. So we would have an Air Malta flight, and then we'd go to Charles de Gaulle or London or Amsterdam. We'd switch. We'd have to go through security again, go through customs, do the whole show,
Oh my
and
gosh.
then head back to the States or vice versa. So I think we got pretty good at hauling kids and bags around airports by the time we got through that.
So when you came back to the States, did you already had this idea of traveling with your kids, but I know you also like to tie in the value of getting outside.
Yeah, yeah. So even if you look at the trips that we did in Europe or Morocco or wherever we were with the kids in that early phase of our life, one of the common themes was we weren't kind of sitting in hotels and cities just hanging out. We were always outdoors doing something, and that's both my wife and I grew up with it. We grew up camping and just grew up valuing time not only outdoors but really in the backcountry away from most forms of life. And so when we came back to the States, we moved back in 2019. We moved to a new part of the cities. We didn't know anyone, just starting to make friends. I think we had a trip planned to Zion National Park, and then I think a week before we left, COVID came.
Oh, oh no.
Uh, and so we all got locked in our houses. The world changed substantially. Um, International travel was gone. Plane travel was done. Like there was no
Yeah.
way.
Oh, I know. It was just overnight. Yeah.
Everything was done. We have older parents. My wife has her grandma is now 98, so
Oh,
and we're
wow.
the kind of the only ones close enough to care for her. So we really didn't have any other options. So we kind of say we went back to our roots, but we just said, you know what, we can still camp. We have a tent, we have all the gear, we can go in the woods, and there's no one else back there.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we just kind of did a big pivot at that stage and said, we're still going to have the same kind of volume of adventures that we've always had. We're going to teach our kids the value of travel and experiencing new things. But instead of through that international lens, which was off the table, we're just going to do it through another option. And that's, in Minnesota, it just means going up north. The northern part of the state is less populated. It's pretty wild. And there's just a ton of great opportunities, whether it's at state parks or national forests or
Yeah,
wilderness areas that COVID or no COVID, you can get away.
right.
Made a big shift. And for a couple of years, that's all we did.
Oh,
We did a lot
wow.
of and so, one of the things we love to do is Minnesota has what's called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area. And so that's a huge, it's not really a national park, it's a wilderness area, but similar, but without, there's no kind of national park building or anything.
Yeah.
We take the kids, sometimes we'll be in the backcountry for 7, 8, 9 days.
Oh,
You
wow.
pack in food, you pack in all your gear, you canoe across the lake, you pick everything up, carry it on a portage to the next one. And we've been doing that since the youngest was 2. And
Oh my.
kind of through the whole thing, they've always carried a little backpack. And when she was 2, it was this little pink thing with a stuffed animal in it and probably, one snack.
Right.
They're 6 and 9 now, and now they carry backpacks that are true survival packs. So they have a tarp in it if something happens. They have a knife, they have a compass, they have snacks, they have a first aid kit, and it's all things that, because we've had this time hanging out in the woods waiting for life to get back, but we've built those skills for them so they can use a pocket knife safely and they can start a fire on their own
Oh my
safely.
gosh. That
But
is
I wouldn't
great, actually. I mean, more kids, I think, need to learn these skills. I mean, it's not something they're teaching in the school system. I don't even know if they teach a cooking class anymore.
think all that hands-on stuff's gone, and there's this fear that something bad's going to happen. And the truth is, something might. Kids are kids, and they get excited and they get kind of sidetracked. It's like when they have their knives out, we have pretty strict rules. Adults always around. We've taught them how to cut away from their body and all just the basic safety things. And then if they show good behavior, they get to keep doing it. They show bad behavior, the knife goes back in dad's backpack, and then they got to wait a couple of days.
Right.
It slowly teaches them that respect for something like a knife. And then when we cook at home, they have, they appreciate that knives are sharp and dangerous, and
Right.
they can help us chop vegetables safely with a real knife, and we don't have to worry too much.
Yeah. So you've been doing all their outdoor training, like all the skill sets of like just, being in the woods, maybe, things to, look for, all of that?
We've done it, yep. And then we're fortunate we have a lot of other families that we go out with, and there's a group in Minnesota. So not to make it sound like we're even weirder than we already are,
Yeah.
we also camp in the winter with the kids. And
Oh,
so
really? Oh, nice.
coldest night we've slept outside with them was -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And we have a tent that has like a wood burning stove. But the point of the story is there's a get together every fall where all the weird Minnesotans that like to do that in the winter get together to kind of get excited for the season again. And as part of that, they hold classes and seminars. And there's always a kids program. And so there's, the kids have another opportunity besides mom and dad to be with other kids their age, to go out with an instructor and learn some of these basic kind of safety things. And then, there's courses for adults too that the kids can watch and learn. And they both learned how to make fires because they were with me at a kind of a backwoods safety class, and they befriended the instructor. He gave them his fire starter, sat them down for a half hour, and taught them how to use it.
Oh, wow. That's great. Do you think that there's places in other states that people could look for resources to find similar type programs? Or, I know REI, for example, the store sometimes does classes. I don't know if they're always geared towards just adults, though.
Yeah. So REI is a great resource. That's by far our favorite kind of gear store. They do. I remember we used to rock climb a lot, and we took some of our introductory rock climbing classes through REI probably 20 years ago. But then there's, if you have anywhere that have outfitters, so places that we'll are renting people the gear, whether it's for backpacking trips, canoeing trips, whatever it is. They'll for sure be a good resource. Um, and then every state has some kind of wilderness first aid
Oh, okay.
organization, where you can actually get certified in wilderness first aid. And they also are a great resource for just finding something probably closer to you that can provide the real hands-on training so you can have those basic skills.
Right. Because I think, like with anything, if you learn something and have a skill, that a lot of the fear goes away of, what's out there in the woods or how to encounter, what happens if it starts raining and how to be prepared, all of that.
Exactly. And we get asked a lot about gear. Like what gear do we use, especially with kids?
Yes.
That could be for parents one of the main like sources of anxiety or fear. And our first response is always that the gear is secondary. If you don't have the skills for it, like if you don't know how to put up your tent,
Oh,
buying
yeah.
a tent's not going to do you any good. So we always encourage people, whether they're adults or kids, whether they're beginners or advanced, whether it's this outdoor stuff or whether it's taking your kids on a plane. Like the gear is not the solution. It's
Right.
just it helps. And so build those skills, focus there, and then if you have the skills, then you know a nicer tent or a lighter tent or a better backpack, then they're really going to help you because you're ready for it.
Right. And you know what to do with it. Exactly. Because the tent probably won't put itself up.
Yep.
So, as we're looking at autumn, do you have some favorite budget-friendly destinations in your area in the Midwest? I think there's a lot of hidden gems in the Midwest. I mean, just like you talking about the Boundary Waters. I mean, that is a beautiful area. You've
Yep.
got so much there, but it's kind of, again, it's not in the national park system, so it's kind of something that people aren't as familiar with.
Exactly. And the Midwest, we're very fortunate. We don't have probably as many national parks as out west, but we have a lot of state parks and state recreation areas and kind of smaller places like that. And so we focus a lot of our time on Minnesota and Wisconsin state parks because they're very well equipped, and if you aren't like into backcountry camping, like you're really
Right.
just starting this, a lot of them have car camping. You can just pull up and set your stuff up around your car. And if you get a storm or it's just not for you, or you feel like you bit off more than you can chew, then you can just hop in the car. So you've got that little place of safety, and it's almost free.
Oh, wow. That's
So
good to know.
a night at a state park is $10, probably maybe 15 around here. So it's a really cheap alternative. If it's a couple nights, you can pack your own, kind of pre-cook your meals. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have to worry about going out and having the expense of going out with the family and having a simple meal turn out to be $100.
Right. Exactly.
All that pre-done. Um, and we also like to go, especially as it gets towards, further out of the tourist season here, which is really the summer. We like to actually go back and hit these very popular tourist towns that have seen all the summer crowds leave.
Yes.
A bit the same in Europe. If you go to Greece in August, it's going to be a zoo. But you go in October, the weather is going to be beautiful, the water's still warm, and nobody will be there.
Right.
So in Minnesota, there's towns way up north. One's Ely and one's Grand Marais. They're beautiful little towns. There's a ton going on, good restaurants, cool places to stay, and they're a lot cheaper because there's no one around.
Right. Yeah, those are some good tips. Do some of these state parks also have cabins for people that, again, are just kind of that first step? It's not a hotel room, but, they can maybe start with the fire and some of the other activities.
Yep. So a lot of them have, at least the Minnesota styles, they have what are called rustic cabins. So they may have electricity, they might not. Some have running water, some don't. So some you have to bring, in your car, you just have to go pick up a couple gallon jugs of water.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but they usually have a wood burning stove, the wood's there ready for you. So it's kind of a nice next step. And, that's something we do and we have for probably about 4 years, every New Year's Eve.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
we go up north as a family. Usually it's true winter here, so there's snow on the ground. We bring our snowshoes or our cross country skis, and we'll stay in a Airbnb cabin. And Minnesota's pretty unique in that you can find anything from very high-end, beautiful cabins to cabins that have no running water, no electricity. Um, and so we try to find one in the middle that maybe has some running water and maybe solar powered electricity or something. So we still have that feeling of being a little, outside of our normal element.
Yeah.
Um, but we can relax and it's not so much work.
Right, exactly. Are there apps or things you use to help do your planning for travel, especially with a family? I know you're probably, especially most families now, I mean, budget is a concern. I mean, if you've got two kids or four kids or, it's just, it adds up.
It does, yeah. I mean, we don't use too much. We love VRBO.
Okay.
For whatever reason in Minnesota, the selection of kind of unique lodging is just way larger on VRBO than it is on Airbnb.
Wow, that's nice to know.
Yeah. So we kind of when we came back from Europe, we kept looking. We couldn't find anything. Like when we're like, we know there are tons of log cabins all over the state.
Yes,
We'll
yeah.
have to, and we couldn't find anything to save our lives. And then, we slowly learned that it was just I don't know if it's a cultural difference or whatnot, but people just tend to list them there. Probably don't have to pay as high.
Right.
And when we plan more complex trips, we usually have like a Google Sheets open.
Oh, okay.
We'll have multiple tabs, and because we'll each be taking a piece of the planning. One's maybe working on logistics, one's working on what kind of activity, one's working on lodging options. And we use that as a way that even while we're at work, one of
Oh,
us
yeah.
have a little lunch break or something, we can do a bunch of that work and auto updates for the other person. They can go in there um, and kind of see where we're at. And we tend, if we're flying somewhere, we have a unique approach to how we build these trips because flying with kids is just really expensive. When you're
Oh,
buying
yeah. Right.
four tickets, it doesn't matter if they're cheap. It can be Sun Country, it can be Delta. It's still going to cost you a fortune. And so we kind of built this approach when we were in Europe, and we use it here, where instead of saying I want to go to Florida, I want to go to Puerto Rico, let's figure out how to do it. We look at what options do we have for direct flights that are reasonable. We'll
Oh,
start with an open mind of we don't care where. Maybe we have a criteria that has to be warm or has to have a beach or
right.
has a jungle or something. And then we just look through the list. And then we start looking at our dates and whatever one's the cheapest that we haven't been to and with a direct flight, we book that ticket. And then we start thinking, okay, where in that country do we want to go? Do we need to rent a car? Do we not? What kind of lodging are we looking for? Um, and we slowly build the trip up from that angle, which is, I think, a different way of thinking about travel. Usually we set our hearts on a destination and then we do everything we can to try to make that work, but it ends up just being expensive. You could have picked your destination on the most expensive week.
Right.
And
Oh,
that's
exactly.
school holiday. We don't have a whole lot of choice on when we can escape for a week. So
Yeah,
you're
I like that approach. That's actually really good because pretty, like you said, especially with school age children, you're limited. Like you said, when this break is coming up and probably starting to think about it earlier before everyone else decides, like, oh, yeah, we've got to quickly plan something for that week.
exactly. And if you think about the globe, we just try to stay vertical. So when we were in Europe, we weren't taking trips to Asia or to Latin
Right.
America. It's just you end up losing a day or two on each side with jet lag and it's
Oh, yeah.
complicated and you lose time with time zones in the flights. And so if you want to maximize your time away, if you're in the States, just go to Canada or go south, you know, and eventually you'll chip away all the easy ones and you'll be beyond the Caribbean and Central America. And you might be looking at Colombia or, all the way down to Argentina or something, but you're still in the same time zone.
Right.
And those flights are generally cheaper. And in Europe, we would just look in Europe, start cheap, start easy. And, once you've hit all the places, then, you got to start to expand that horizon a
Right.
little, not that much.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good tip. I like that a lot. Yeah. So
Good.
do you have what about gift giving? I know for like myself, I know growing up we did. My parents did fully believe in, like, you know what, you're not going to get a lot of gifts because we're going to do X in the summer. Is that something you've kind of initiated with your kids, or talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're probably in the middle. We have one side of the family, if you think about grandparents, that is just very traditionalist, loves to get them stuff. We have the other side that, spent a lot of time overseas and just have a different mindset on gift giving. And as parents, we've decided to kind of fall in the middle. So they get, usually like if you think about Christmas, they'll get one big thing. And for us, big is not that big, but it's for them, it's a
Yeah.
something to look forward to. They'll get a stocking with stuff. And usually there's a theme to it. So if we know, like last January, we knew we were going to Puerto Rico. And so we'll get them like swimming goggles or some flippers or things that are going to be useful on these adventures and aren't just stuff that's going to
Yeah.
close. And last year too, we started doing like a holiday volunteer event. And so we took the kids to Feed My Starving Children, which is a local nonprofit that puts together meals. Um, and spent a morning, introducing them to the fact that not everyone's as fortunate, and getting a gift is the last of their worries.
Right.
And so we're like everything in our life, we're like in that muddy middle where we don't really have much for extreme beliefs, but we just try to, each decision try to just steer us and the kids towards, you know, something better.
No, I like that idea of like a volunteer type thing. And if you look in your area too, I know there's organizations where, and even some of the businesses will host it. Sometimes you just have to dig a little, like where you can, buy an item and wrap it up or draw a name that describes a child or family and what they need. And so just including your kids in that process too, of, the idea you're getting something for someone else and the joy that they'll get from that.
And we were very surprised. Our kids, you never know how kids are going to react.
Yeah.
It's always, it's a bit of a crapshoot. And they were really excited by it. And they were a little nervous at first because you're kind of going into a factory and there's bags of food that you're
Right.
mixing. By the end, they were so, they were competing with the tables next to us on who could fill as many meals the fastest. And then they talked about it for a long time.
Really?
So they understood what was going on. They were able to internalize it, at least at their level. And so actually this weekend on Saturday, unrelated to birthdays, but we're doing another similar event where we have some friends that are hosting like a backpack stuffing event. So
Oh,
for
nice.
school where a lot of the kids don't have access to school materials, they had a bunch of companies donate, and then we're putting backpacks together for folks so that these kids have something to start with. And so our kids are giving up a Saturday where they thought they were going to the local parade, for our kind of town event, but they're still excited about it, and they understand what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So I know you've been to a lot of destinations taking your families. I've seen some of the amazing photos on your website. What are some of the places that you think your kids really did enjoy the most that you would suggest for other parents? And maybe there may be some that are more age specific that kind of worked.
I think our best family trip, bar none, and so to put it in perspective, I think our daughter had just turned 2 because it was the first flight that she had her own seat,
Oh,
where
wow.
on our laps, and my son would have been 4 or 5, and we went to Morocco.
Oh, wow.
And we've been, I think we counted up between me and my wife, we've been to, I think, 64 countries. We've probably lived in 5 or 6 of them. And Morocco was by far the best trip we've ever taken. And it was relatively easy with kids. It's very affordable. It was the first time we've ever had help. So we hired a driver while we were there, which was surprisingly really cheap. And we did a road trip around the whole country. And
Oh,
so we,
wow.
Marrakesh, and we went into the Atlas Mountains, and then we did like a glamping experience in the desert with, camels,
Right.
camels out into some little setup, and then went around to the north to Fez and back down. And we had, like, Moroccans are just very kid friendly. And so anytime we were walking through like the old souks or the old towns, like all the old men were so friendly towards the kids. The kids were friendly towards them. they're always getting samples of something or, unique experiences. And, you've got that combination of just unique sights and
Yeah.
smells,
Oh, wow.
call to prayer that you don't hear in, many countries. And that was just a very fascinating trip.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing too, because for many of us, even as adults, we haven't been to Morocco. And it's kind of one of those places that, we kind of think it's just so different. We just, the language, just the words. I mean, it's not anything like, there's no similarities in so many levels that it's kind of overwhelming. So talk a
Exactly.
little bit about how you planned that. Were there tips for some of those things? I mean,
Yeah. So this is the only trip we have ever hired someone like a tour operator to put something together. And I think,
yeah.
that was towards the end of our time in Malta. And I think we were just tired.
Oh,
we had, we
yeah.
had nothing left in us. And so we knew we wanted to go to Morocco. We kind of just Googled for blog posts
Oh,
for people
nice.
that were kids. There weren't that many of them. And we found one organization that was putting on some trips and just kind of booked it. And I mean, one of the coolest parts is the driver that we had, Jamal, ended up being a good family friend of ours. And
Really?
so we spent, a week with him. We have probably more pictures of him carrying one of our kids through, streets and shops and historic sites and whatever than we have of ourselves. And we have this super cute picture where we were getting ripped off buying rugs at some rug shop. You've got both of my kids and Jamal, our driver, having a tea party.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh.
He knew that we were getting ripped off, but at the same time, he just, let us do our thing, watch the kids for us. And now we FaceTime with them all the time. We've had my in-laws have gone and he's put a trip together for them. We've had friends go and he's put trips together for them. And it's kind of one of those, really fun things where you end up building a real relationship through what was just a vacation.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. Oh my gosh. So, last question. Um, Balance, for parents. I know, having kids and traveling with them and doing all the stuff, sometimes you kind of feel like, what happened to my life with my wife or my husband? So, how do you maintain some sort of balance and fit in some adult time?
So I feel like we've got this like traveling with kids thing down about as close to a science as you can. I'd say that part we probably need some work. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to find that balance. It's hard to prioritize it. We're both working parents. Our kids are involved in, you know, tons of activities. That's just the world we live in. We tried to fight it for a while, but then you're at home and your kids have no one to play with because all their buddies are at
Yeah.
activities. You kind of are, you're kind of stuck.
Right.
And so we've tried to do a better job of even just like having a date night every month or two. Or like, we went to this TBEX conference
Yeah.
and I was selected to go to the trip afterwards hosted by Explore Lacrosse. So I'd been at a conference all week. My wife was home with the kids. It was her birthday that weekend. I was going to be gone again. And so I just called the folks at Explore Lacrosse and said, I'm happy to foot the bill for whatever the marginal cost is for her coming, but is there any way she can join us?
Right.
And they said, don't worry about it. And yes, she can. And
Nice.
while it wasn't like a true kind of date weekend, with no care in the world, there was still some work involved in it. We were able to turn that into some alone time. And so, I mean, I think one of the things we've learned is finding that true alone time, like you had pre-kids, is next to impossible.
Right.
But you can find these other times that are maybe 80% of the way there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're good enough.
Right.
And you have to prioritize it and you got to plan. And I'm not a planner. When the first time when we started dating, my wife was going to be a tangent, but she was student teaching in Brazil. And I surprised her. I just flew down there with one of her friends. I didn't have a hotel. I didn't know where she was. I knew she was in Rio. That's it. We took
Oh
the
my
bus from the airport. I heard the driver call Ipanema, and I remembered that girl from Ipanema, Bossa
yes.
Nova. I, was,
Right.
I think this is a popular place. Let's hop off. And so that's about, that's all. I had nothing,
Right.
phone number, and that's it. And so I'm not very good at like thinking ahead for that kind of stuff. But I've learned I have to because otherwise life moves so fast
Oh
when you have
yeah.
that, you blink and then, I've got a 9-year-old. Who'd have guessed?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is so true with anyone that has kids, or if you have grandkids or nieces or nephews, even, is that they grow up and change so fast.
Yeah.
And carving out that time, and if you are like an aunt or uncle or a grandparent too, like the parents can use you to take these children, even for an afternoon, come up with an activity because it does. It's like my niece. It's like one minute she was 5 or 6, and next thing I know, she's in high school. I'm like, what the heck happened?
And it's hard. And like, I think, I have a younger brother who's probably going to have kids. And when I look at it now, what have I learned is that as the uncle, I have to force the issue. I can't say we're here when you need it because as parents, you don't have time to plan the thing for the uncle to take the kids. Like
No,
what I've learned is if I want to be helpful and I want to be successful at spending time with nieces and nephews, then I have to do it. I have to initiate it. I have to make it easy on the parents. And I think the easier I can make it for them, the more time I'm going to get to spend with them, and the more of a break the parents get.
yeah. And I do agree with that. You have to, as an aunt or uncle or other relative, if you want to spend time with these little children and start that relationship, which I truly believe you got to start early. I mean, they develop their own interests now so quickly, and you're just going to be this rando person at the next, Thanksgiving dinner. You got to, make time, whether that's, flying in there for a weekend or and just calling the parents and say, hey, is this weekend good? I'm going to come. I'll sleep on the floor if I have, whatever it is, the thing. Yes, I agree. As relatives and those people that are surrounding these children, we have to help you because you're in the thick of it. You're not gonna reach out to us. It's much easier as aunts and uncles to be the one to come up with ideas, and plan it and do it.
Exactly. Yep.
So, any last tips for autumn destinations in the Midwest that you would recommend for families? And definitely we'll tell people where they can check out your blog and reach out if they have questions.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Midwest, it's a little bit like what we had when we were living in Europe. We had Central Europe there. So you think like Germany, Austria. The Midwest, when you get around the holidays, you have a lot of these kind of traditional markets. So La Crosse has a Rotary Lights Festival where they have, I don't know how many million lights in a park. And kids can go meet Santa and things like that. So if you dig around, there are tons of, events to spend. I think there's more being created to kind of bring back that traditional feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, extra prevalent in the Midwest just because of where most of the original immigrant communities came from. They were Central European or Scandinavian. And so those are cheap destinations. They're easy trips. Kids love them. Um, and half the time they've got like a glue wine stand or a mulled wine stand, and you can just have a glass of wine and watch your kids run around in the snow. And that's about as easy parenting as it gets.
Yeah, and if you live outside of the Midwest, I think that if you look at some of the airports, you can find some really good deals to the Midwest, to places like Minneapolis, some of the cities in Wisconsin, or flying into Minneapolis, you're an hour away from so many things there. So it's just a matter of, 2 or 3 day weekend. You could really create something that's completely different from California, Texas, Florida, wherever that may be, so you can have that winter experience, and there's lots to do.
And people don't often know, but Minneapolis is a major Delta hub. And so, it's not a huge community, it's reasonably sized. But from an airport and flight standpoint, I think our airport often gets rated one of the easiest to travel in, and our flight options are out of this world. So if you want to come, you're right, it's not going to be that expensive. It's a true winter here, so it will be cold. But there's light rail, there's easy ways to get around, and you can stay warm.
Yeah, that sounds good, Anthony. So how can people reach Tent to Takeoff?
Yep. So we're easy. We're most active on Instagram. The handle is from tent to takeoff. Facebook's the same, from tent to takeoff. And our website or blog is www.fromtenttotake.com.
Great. So reach out to Anthony if you've got questions about traveling to kids or find out more about that Morocco experience. That sounds amazing. And I'm sure he might give you the contact name too, it sounds like. So thank you so much, Anthony, for your time. This has been fabulous.
Thanks for having me.